Today, folks, I'm chatting with Lindsay Nagel of Infinitum Energy. And this discussion is going to take us all over the world with energy and the experiences that the team at Infinitum have had and their current growth plans in Africa that are really quite exciting to see. So with that, welcome to the podcast, Lindsay.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having us.
Hey, what I'd like to sort of have you do now is tell us about your history with your co-founders and what brings you to this company today.
Well, we are a renewable energy developer, very hyper-focused in the emerging markets, and obviously Africa is really something that we see a lot of potential in, and that's where a big part of our focus is going to be going forward.
But you guys have some history though in this space, and not just this Infinitum. Tell us a little bit about your history in the renewable sector.
Most certainly do. So my mentor, our chairman, Brian O'Sullivan, is kind of a legend in the renewable energy space. He first started in 1982 developing wind projects in California, and then went on to develop them in 13 countries, 4 continents, for a total of about 5,500 megawatts and $12 billion of wind deployed over his career. So collectively, between him and the rest of the executive team, we've got about 180 years of combined executive experience developing energy projects globally.
And that's just the first pass. So here you are again, and you clearly have ambitions again. What brought you guys together to say we have unfinished business?
Well, pre-COVID, I was in the midst of developing a 51 megawatt wind farm in Mongolia. Obviously, COVID kind of put a screeching halt to that, so divested interest out of that. And out of COVID, started Infinitum to pick on the low-hanging fruit globally and get back on the saddle and get out there and start developing renewable energy projects throughout the world. We've now got projects started in Mongolia again, doing a wind project there. We've got wind and solar going on in Sri Lanka, which is kind of on hold right now given the political situation, but that'll get going here again soon. And we've got a waste to energy project going in Turkey, one in Sierra Leone, and one in Uganda.
How many hours in a day do you have there? Wow, that's impressive.
Well, eat, sleep, rinse, repeat kind of deal. with work taking up nearly all the time in between.
Now, so what's your background to the space, Lindsay? Where do you come from professionally, and how do you come to this?
So I come from a construction background in transmission, distribution, major projects, and in 2015 when I met Brian, I kind of started segueing a little ways out of the just transmission and distribution into more renewable energy development. Back then, I had my own consulting engineering firm with some notable clients. We were up working northern Alberta with Suncor Energy, putting together a large asset management plan for them. And in 2018, when that project wrapped up, that's when I ended up going to Mongolia to get started on, well, it was my first renewable energy project then.
So now you find yourself in half a dozen different locations that you're working on, and Africa is taking up 2 of those current locations. Tell me about what attracts you to renewable energy in Africa, or just energy creation on the continent. What is it about there that you see the opportunity?
Well, I mean, if you want to use the hockey analogy, you go where the puck's going, not where the puck is, and Africa is where the opportunity, in our opinion at least, is going to be over the next probably 30 years. I mean, you have a median age of 19.7 on the continent, lots of young people, lots of ambition, primarily democratic, tons of resources. This is where the opportunity is going to be. It's not going to be in these older aging population bases. It's going to be where all the growth is going to be happening, and that's going to be Africa.
And so the locations you've picked, so let's go with Sierra Leone first. What is it about the opportunity in Sierra Leone that says, yep, that's where we want to be. This is prime property for us?
Well, a big primary driver to where we go geographically is local partners,
Okay.
especially in an emerging market. You are only as good as your local partner. They have to be able to get in front of the right decision maker to present the opportunity, present the project. So we have great local partners, both in Sierra Leone and Uganda. But also there has to be a good business opportunity there as well, right? Sierra Leone is a young country, has a population of 7.5 million, one of the lowest accesses to electricity in the continent at about 22%. So it leaves a lot of room for improvement. And they also have a large waste management issue. There's 3 dump sites, let's call them. I mean, these are not North American style landfills, but so waste just gets dumped there daily, but to the tune of maybe 15-20% of the collection. The rest ends up in rivers and streams, washing into the ocean, burned on the side of the road, something like that. So there's a really big opportunity there to bring the community together and create a meaningful waste collection infrastructure where waste is no longer just waste. It's actually a commodity that can create light, create power, education, and at the end of all that, that's increased GDP. So it's a real net benefit to everyone.
So the waste to energy that you're looking at developing is based on a set reserve or like a landfill reserve, or it's based on, no, there's a whole infrastructure that grows and we want to be part of that? How are you guys positioning yourselves in that?
So our proposal to the government is to help remediate the landfills, because there is some value in those landfills. At the end of the day, they've mostly degraded down. So the fuel in the landfills is not that great compared to fresh fuel, but there is something there. So we're going to help them clean those up. The long-term goal is to be able to help catalyze the waste collection infrastructure around it, thus creating, hundreds of thousands of jobs, right? A solar facility employs 20 people. A wind facility employs 40 or 50 people, maybe. Waste to energy is over 10 times that. Just directly employed at our facility, we'll be looking at somewhere in the range of 200 people. And then if you add in all the ancillary services around waste collection and even local connection to transfer points and stuff like that, we'll easily be looking at north of 1,000. So call it 1,200 all in.
Wow, that's affecting GDP in a real way, 100%.
Yeah, most certainly is.
Now, for those of us that are new to the waste to energy medium and or protocol for energy creation, walk me through, waste arrives at the dump or the landfill. Now what? What's the process till a electron is created on the other side?
Well, waste energy obviously has been around for years in various fashions and technologies. Traditionally was moving great, which is basically just burning garbage, which is not obviously a very good environmental way of processing waste. And now it's advanced considerably since those days, with various technologies being pyrolysis on kind of the low temperature end right up to plasma. We're going in the middle on this project here, which will likely be a gasification technology. And the idea with the gasification technology is we have all these people employed, the waste will come in, get dumped, sorted through, metals come out, glass comes out, pieces of dirt, concrete, things like that, that provide no real heating value, so to speak.
Yeah. Then
the rest of it gets processed, dried, most of the moisture gets taken out, and it gets turned into what is called refuse-derived fuel, which is used all over the world. It's used in cement kilns and places like that. So that then becomes the fuel for the gasification technology. It goes in, and in a very low oxygen environment, it's heated up. So you need oxygen to burn. So no oxygen, no burning. You just create synthetic gas. And that synthetic gas is then processed and used to generate power.
Now, does the composition of the landfill affect your efficiency? So if it has more organics versus more plastics or that kind of thing, or how does that work for you?
It most certainly does. So when you're thinking of it if you think about what you would put in a fire, if it burns hotter in a fire, it's going to be better for the gasification technology in the same way. So plastics are on the top end. That's the best we can have, plastics.
Okay.
And then going down the list, you get tires and wood and paper, and then down on the bottom end you have kind of food waste, organic waste. That's the bottom. There's a lot of moisture in it. You need to take the moisture out to a certain point to really create a fuel. So organics are the least desirable, but they are also the most plentiful. Generally, organics compose 60 to 70% of the overall weight of the fuel. So it's by far the biggest portion.
Now, what's your end product then? You know, you've got this gasification, and you've got something that can be used to produce energy. From an electricity point of view, do you end up also with synthetic fuels or anything along that nature for other parts of the value chain in energy, or where do you guys sit in that?
So you can. You can process the synthetic gas into fuels, and just as if you've got 100 pounds of synthetic gas and you want to do 50 pounds of that into power, you can do that. You would have 50 pounds left over to create synthetic fuels out of. It's a far more complex process, though. So generally speaking, we're going to at least be focused on one or the other. So Sierra Leone is purely on power.
Yep.
The project we're looking at in Uganda is a lot larger, but given the power market there, which they have a lot of hydro facilities up, so there's the power market there is just not really, can't justify a waste energy facility because they're large and they're expensive. You need to have a relatively rich power purchase price, let's say.
Yeah.
So in Uganda, we are looking to go to renewable fuels only. So that'll be primarily making what's called EN 590 renewable diesel.
Fascinating. The cooperation of the local environments, being the communities, the governments, the jurisdictions, really plays a part into your success going forward, doesn't it?
100%. Without the buy-in of the community, there's no project. Especially in these, regions of the world. They hold such a big stick. They make a lot of noise. So if you don't have the buy-in of everyone from the local community leaders to the schools to the businesses, you'll get nowhere. So they're very much included in our entire development process from start to finish. And we take it very seriously. So all our projects are done to what's called the Gold Standard Initiative, allowing us to market the carbon credits. It's our corporate policy that 2% of every project capital expenditure gets given back to local community initiatives, whether that be schools, roads, hospitals, things like that. So on a project of $150 million, that's $3 million goes back to the local community right off the top.
That'll make a dent or two in positive change. Absolutely.
Yeah, it helps really helps catalyze the interest around the project and get everyone very very much on the same page as what we're looking to achieve.
Now, in Sierra Leone, for example, you have a long-term offtake agreement. Do you do it at spot? What's the, or are you able to talk about that kind of stuff yet?
Oh yeah, no, we can talk about that. I mean, you'll never get a merchant project in an emerging market, so there's no spot rate. These are all long-term offtake agreements with Sierra Leone, with the government. In a place like Uganda, doing renewable fuels, that will be likely with a larger fuel distribution company. So, a Total, a BP, or it could be a local one as well, but it'll be larger. And that project, like I said, it's vastly more complex, way more moving parts. But in all retrospect, there are always going to be larger bankable offtake agreements in place. I mean, we're not an NGO, we're not a charity. We are in it to make money. But in order to do that, we need to have financeable projects with financeable off-takers in order for us to be able to raise the project equity and project debt.
And so that sort of dovetails into the next part I was thinking about, is that you opened up with, here's our history of deploying billions of dollars in capital in the renewable sector. You must have an elbow or two that you've connected, or you've rubbed shoulders with rather, in the space. You come to these projects with support already, right? Is that a fair assumption, or?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, we have a super strong advisory team for raising project equity and debt. We also have our own networks of debt and equity lenders that we lean on for each project. So once we get a project, what we call fully baked, permits, licenses in place, offtake agreements, and you're kind of ready to break ground and start construction, putting the rest of those pieces of the puzzle together is that's not the hard part. The heavy lifting is getting it there. And right now we're looking at ballpark about $1.5 billion, $1.8 billion in development right now. So there's a lot of work to be done, and a lot of money to be raised.
You know what? I find that a refreshing way to look at it. Because so many people are tied up in the whole perceived versus actual risk. And particularly in Africa and the renewable sector, and you go, wait a minute, we've got a history of this. It's not about perceived risk. We're dealing with this in actual, and we've got we'll call it a following of people that want to, from governments to institutions, that want to work with us. And that's very, very, it's very exciting for you guys to be in the space that you're at right now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And there's always a let's call it a geopolitical alignment that comes into play too. So there's always DFIs, the Development Finance Institutes, that have certain vested interests in certain countries, whether it's Sierra Leone or Uganda. So being able to leverage those relationships that they have in place there to provide certain insurance instruments that would give corporate private lenders peace of mind that there is security around it, is always something we have to, or we do. And generally speaking, you'll have to do. But there's always different governments that are looking to support these types of projects. So there's no shortage of people willing to put their money where their mouth is on these types of things.
Do you find that we'll call it coverage from DFIs or whatever affects your yield as a corporate? And I mean, a couple points, yes or no, but I mean, it's like, no, like this DFI coverage is still equaling 20%, 10%. Like, you don't have to give it a number, but just it's weighty enough to the process for that perceived risk.
Well, I mean, are you asking if we don't have a DFI, how much would it cost?
Yeah, maybe sure. Let's go with that then. Yeah.
I mean, I really couldn't peg a number to that, but I can tell you if we're getting debt with a Development Finance Institute underwriting guarantee and our debt's at 7%,
yeah,
they're going to probably charge 3 times that without a DFI. So
okay,
no one's doing a $150 million project on their Visa or MasterCard, so it just wouldn't happen.
Right. No, and I think that's good. The community at large just kind of still have a sense of, this is the real world, people, and this is what capital's going out at. And does the rising interest rate environment that protects the global north is now facing, do you guys look at your projects with a different sort of potential long-term impact on your rate of return? You go, no, it's set, like we're good, like we can give global yield, and we're not worried about that.
Yeah, I mean, sure, it impacts projects, but you always have to look further out, right? These are not 1-year projects or 2-year projects, and as interest rates rise and fall, they're not going to stay up forever, and they're not going to stay down forever. So you have to, you can't be thinking just 2 years or 3 years down the road. If it's a 20-year project, you want to look at a 20-year average. You don't want to be thinking what's right in front of you. Otherwise, you'll be thinking now is never the right time to get started, and then by the time it is the right time to get started, by the time the thing comes commercial operation date, the interest rates have changed, and now you're sweating again. So if you were looking like that on a long-term project, you'd be frozen before you even moved.
Yeah, point well taken. Yeah. So, Sierra Leone, what is the target size of the project that you want to achieve, not just near term, but also that long term vision? What's the objective?
Near-term vision, we're targeting 1,000 ton a day, so 365,000 tons a year of waste, which best estimate gives us about a third of what's generated in the Freetown Western area. There's about 2.2 million people there. The average African generates half a ton a year, so 1.1 million tons or so. So we're aiming to do about a 30% collection, which will possibly produce up to about 38 megawatts. 38 megawatts for Sierra Leone is substantial. The grid typically operates around 70, 74 megawatts. So it's super, super impactful. And like I said, that'll create about 1,200 jobs, and it's baseload power. So wind and solar are wonderful. They're great technologies. We deploy them in other places in the world, but they are complementary to an energy system. They are not the base. If the sun's not shining and the wind isn't blowing, you can't run a factory, and you can't only go to school when the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. So it's a very, very big, impactful project for Sierra Leone and obviously the community at large there.
It comes around to what you're saying, GDP. Before I get now, all of a sudden with that kind of secure base load, you can have businesses growing, you can have industrialization, you can have the real growth of a country from emerging to something more. That's fabulous.
Yep, number one precursor to increased GDP, power.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a carbon output that comes with this process. There's also a landfill savings effect, and you've also mentioned that you guys are able to deal with carbon credits. Yep. What is that? What's that third-party world of carbon credits, carbon-ish, all of these things that everybody has all these, buzzwords for? But how do you, as a developer, look at that as part of the process? Is that an add-on, an icing on the cake, or is that part of your discussion from day one?
It's definitely part of the discussion from day one. So wind and solar are getting more challenging to finance through a carbon credit mechanism, just because the cost of the technology has come down so much that the term is additionality, basically saying, if you didn't have the carbon credits, would you be able to get this project done? So it's becoming a lot more challenging on wind and solar, but on waste to energy, it's very much a big piece of the mix. So the carbon credits can potentially generate a lot of income. And that income obviously can materially affect the project's viability. So typical waste energy project generate about 1.8 million tons a year worth of carbon credits. So the carbon credit market, though, is still pretty new. It's in its infancy stages. But I do believe that in the next 5 to 10 years, it's really going to mature. You've already heard talk from the EU on doing a carbon adjusted border tax, which, if that comes in, is going to drastically change the landscape on people's power mixes. For a place like China, let's say that's 50-60% coal, all of a sudden, if they're getting dinged a carbon tax to sell trinkets into the US, those are going to get taxed. If the US has a carbon tax, or if they're going to the EU. So it's really going to level the playing field globally, and places with a clean energy mix are going to become far more competitive on the export.
So how does that affect in your world and your experiences, we'll call it energy trading within Africa? Like, rather than talking isolated islands of each country, do you think energy trading is going to start growing, and that you're going to have competition cross-border, or you're going to have opportunity cross-border? What do you think of that?
I think you're going to have opportunity cross-border, and I think especially Africa, as it matures, you've got ECOWAS and WAPA and all these other cross-border power grids being implemented. As those mature, I think you're going to see a lot of places capitalizing on their local infrastructure and local geographies. So places with a lot of hydro, may produce a lot of hydro, which allows them to export cheap, low carbon power, but which could also help, an export market like Ghana or somewhere like that. So I think it's really going to help level the playing field across the board and make Africa far more competitive as a whole, because they also don't have that. Because it's such a young continent, they're not so baked into the old way of thinking. They don't have massive coal-fired power plants that are competing against new forms of electricity. So they're really starting from a clean slate, which gives them far more opportunity to do it right. I mean, the OECD has done it for years, but we've also made dozens and dozens and dozens of mistakes. So now that they're on the up and up, and they're getting to see all our mistakes, but also capitalize on all the new technologies and everything else coming along. So they're just going to benefit from it.
That's definitely, dovetailing into your view you expressed earlier that it's a long game, 100%.
Yeah.
There's a need today, and it's a long game for a continent that has the best growth profile anywhere in the world, in my view. Clearly yours as well.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, you look at, China's like almost 50% over 50, right? Then Africa at 50% under 20. It's a lot of runway going in Africa.
Absolutely. Now, I'm just checking my notes here. Where is your growth off that last statement in Africa going forward? Is it in more waste to energy, or is it in some of the other energy implementations that you've done? Where do you see the growth for your company in Africa?
Well, as a developer, we are technology agnostic. We're going to pick the best technology for the best situation. Sierra Leone has, terrible wind resource and a terrible solar resource relative to, solar in Morocco or wind in South Africa. So you want to be able to look at what is going to be the most effective technology to deploy in that region. But there's opportunity aplenty. I mean, we're looking at opportunities in Gambia, Senegal, Ghana. Nigeria is going to be huge. Like I said, Uganda. We're really agnostic to where we go as well geographically. But we do really make waste to energy a pillar of the IEG development mix for multiple reasons, and two of them being baseload generation and the fact you really address the environmental impacts of waste, which as Africa grows, matures as a continent, the waste production is only going to continue to go up. Right now, like I said, it's about 0.5 ton per person per year, but in the OECD, it's double that. It's about 1 ton. So if they get to on par with the OECD, you're doubling the amount of waste that the continent's going to produce.
Now, if you were to say we do X, or we do energy, we do infrastructure, we do, because there's such a bouillabaisse of things there. What would you say it is that you guys do?
Climate infrastructure. That's what we're calling it. There isn't one size fits all, but all of it is infrastructure projects, all centered around helping the climate, which ultimately is helping humans, because at the end of the day, Mother Earth will be fine. It's humans that will suffer.
You know what? With this podcast, we're going to put hashtag climate infrastructure. We're going to start using that all over. We're going to, I've not heard that phrase before. That's quite impactful. You hear about, people doing climate finance and this and that, but with the growth that's going on in Africa from an infrastructure, like you said, water, sewage, city growth, like waste, but it's at the same time, it's dealing with climate at the same time. And I like that. That's a good one.
Thank you.
So from, in our closing comments here, as we're wrapping this up, what would you say is what you want to, and we all know putting timelines is not practical in so many different jurisdictions. It happens when it happens. Like, we can't do that. But if you said by next year or by 3 years from now, what would you say you'd like to people to look at and say, yeah, done, check the box, yep, done? What
We'd like
would
to
you
be
say?
in construction in Sierra Leone, and we'd really like to be expanding the development footprint in Africa. Our target is to make Africa kind of the center to our development focus. Obviously, like I said, we're very emerging market focused, but that's generally speaking, Africa is going to be the focus. So we'd probably like to have another at least 2, maybe 3 projects starting the development process. So getting started on the environmental, the engineering, stuff like that. That would probably be in Nigeria, I would think. We do have a strong nexus to Nigeria. And probably pick 2 other countries. Which ones? We'll have to figure out where the best opportunity is at the time. But yeah, so I would say in construction in Sierra Leone and starting on 3 other projects within the African continent.
Interesting. So you're looking at them at a project base, not on a megawatt size or anything, because it doesn't matter. You're just saying, you know what, kind of take it from
Megawatts
that
is a
approach.
very loaded term. If you have, 100 megawatt solar facility, but it only generates 20% capacity factor, that's the same as a 21 megawatt waste to energy facility in terms of kilowatt hours generated. So
Yeah.
the term megawatts is it sounds good, but it doesn't actually always mean big impact.
Interesting. And the fact that you guys are approaching it from, we'll call it a baseload supplement or a baseload addition is pretty important as well. That's
Yeah, like I said, the wind and solar are complementary. They're not an energy system. They're you add them in.
yeah. Well, fair enough. As a closing question for you, then, if you were able to get a phone call from somebody on the African continent, a government, an official, a potential partner, an end user, who would that be that you would say, yeah, I'd love to have a call. I'd love to have a conversation with somebody, on the continent. Who might that be? Names aside, maybe profile of person or something. But if you want to do names, it's up to you. But if you said, I'd love to have that, who might that be?
That's a big question that could hypothetically have a lot of answers. If I had to pick one person, a governor of a state that wants to hang their hat on having the cleanest state in their country, where we could, garner the support of them as a leader and be able to push another large waste energy project forward that would allow them to obviously create jobs and create a clean environment where we can do what we do best, which is develop energy projects and allow them to showcase to all their constituents that, hey, I pushed for this, they came, and now it's delivered.
That's a fabulous open door for a lot of people to reach out to you. No, that's quite powerful. Lindsay, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate this chat. I know you're a busy man. You're on the road. You're always doing things, and sometimes it's hard to nail you down. So I appreciate the time here to have this chat. We will make sure that in the show notes and the corresponding material that goes with this, that there's your website details, there's contact details for your firm, any of your social media details, they'll all be there so that people can reach out to you on a project level, and also people can reach out to you on an interest level to follow your progress, and whether it be from the actual financings of the projects to the implementations and the example that you provide on the continent. So we'll make sure that all those details are there. And again, thanks for the time. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for the time, Chris, and thanks for the invite.
You
It's
bet.
great to talk.